Greetings all on this fine, fair, slightly rainy, thunderstormy evening, part-time. And happy St. Patrick's Day. Welcome to the March meeting of 2006 of the New York chapter of ARSC. Tonight we're going to have David Lewis and Rebecca Forste present a program called I May Be Crazy, But I Ain't No Fool, The Legacy of Funnyman Ragtime Bob Roberts. And those of you who were here last month were trying to figure out who he was. Now we finally will find out. Many collectors of vintage records need no introduction to Robert S. Ragtime Roberts, one of the most charismatic and mysterious figures in the early phonograph industry, his name appearing on nearly 500 discs and cylinder releases. Researcher Rebecca Forste and I have been looking into the Bob Roberts story from the context of his hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio, and have made new discoveries in the life of this key entertainer. We have discovered a new birth date for him and have made inroads into his family history, particularly in regards to his illustrious father, minstrel show entertainer and circus entrepreneur Nick Roberts, 1841 to 1905. This will be a joint presentation where the Nick Roberts related material will be presented by Rebecca Forste, with Uncle Dave Lewis joining in on Roberts' recording activity and later career in early radio. David and Uncle Dave Lewis, like the hat.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, has been an ARSC member since 1999. He has presented at several ARSC conferences since giving his first talk in Santa Barbara in 2002 on the subject of the obscure band leader Harry Spindler. Lewis ran the underground record label Hospital Records out of Cincinnati in the 1980s and has had a long presence in public radio, appearing in years-long programs on WAIF in Cincinnati and WCNB in Ann Arbor, Michigan, from the University of Michigan. He worked as a classical music buyer for the West Coast Tower Records and Virgin Megastores locations in the 1990s and spent a decade as an editor for the All Music Guide, now Rovi Corp. Yeah. Today he presents monthly lectures at the Public Library of Cincinnati in Hamilton County on the topics relating to the music and recording industry in the Ohio Valley. Oh, that's where we got all our weather from. You get it first and then we get it here. And is an historian and producer for WVXU, the NPR affiliate in Cincinnati. His radio piece on band leader Earl Fuller won an Excellence in Journalism Award from the Society for Professional Journalists. Rebecca Forste, take a bow, has worked as a contributor and editor for a variety of publications. Her background and interest in sound recordings is largely the legacy of her late mother, who is an audiophile and long-standing collector. She contributes reviews to the ARSC Journal and returns these meetings following her initial appearances last year in the Hal Kemp program. Without further ado, Rebecca Forste and Uncle Dave Lewis.
One of my favorites.
Yes, now going back. Oh, this is the oldest one on the bunch here. This is 1897 by Robert S. Roberts. Only thing else I know about him I learned from Tom is that he wrote the word to the music to I'm Certainly Living a Ragtime Life, yeah, which the Porcupines played last night. But here is an earlier one. Here is The Pride of Bucktown.
Hi. Before we begin, I would like to offer my gratitude to the following folks: Ryan Barna, Steve Kemple, Tim Grachik, Alan Sutton, the West Coast Ragtime Festival, Jeremy Stevenson, Cecile Laccade, Patrick Feaster, my brother Christopher, and the late Jim Walsh. I would also like to send out a special shout out to Frederick Wallace Forste, who passed away last month. He attended and enjoyed many of the talks that Rebecca and I have given, and he also saw an earlier version of this talk, and which he saw the version that we presented in Pittsburgh at the ARS conference last May, and necessarily that version was drastically cut, which they often are, and given the time limit that we were in, and I deeply appreciate the generosity of the New York ARS chapter for this opportunity to present the whole program, particularly as quite a bit of new information of Bob Roberts has come to light since that talk was delivered. The audio you will hear comes from my own collection, the University of California, Santa Barbara's Cylinder Project, and the Library of Congress's National Jukebox. Between these sources, one may encounter over 100 Bob Roberts recordings made for Columbia, Victor, Indestructible, U.S. Everlasting, and Edison. And also, I'd like to send a shout out to a YouTube project, the 2-Minute Albany Archive, which is a guy that's trying to post the entire Albany Indestructible Cylinder catalog in numerical order. That's really admirable. Bob Roberts was a pioneer in most of the things he tried. Ragtime composer, recording artist, stand-up comedian, and early radio comic. One critical element of his story is that Bob Roberts, who was a singer on more than 530 now recordings made in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, and ragtime composer Robert S. Roberts are the same person. Not even the guys from the West Coast Ragtime Festival seem to realize that. What we heard was The Pride of Bucktown, and it was published in Cincinnati in 1897, which was the very first year that ragtime music appeared in print. If J.H. Krell's The Mississippi Rag does indeed remain to be the first known rag to appear in print, The Pride of Bucktown is either second or third, maybe first, depending on which month it appeared that year. The basic elements of ragtime music, of course, had been coursing through American music for decades already. Its presence in the later piano music of Louis Moreau Gaucho or in pieces found in Confederate military band books makes that clear. To date, not much has been known about Bob Roberts in a biographical sense. Rebecca Forste is here today, and she's been lifting the veil on Bob Roberts' life and that of his illustrious, once famous father, Nick Roberts, and also devoting a lot of attention to Bob's family history, which was steeped in entertainment. This new information is vital to an understanding of Ragtime Bob. I'd like you to welcome Rebecca Forste.
Thank you. I'm just going to be telling you about Nick Roberts, Bob Roberts' father today. My part of the presentation is pretty short compared to what Uncle Dave has prepared for you. Nick Roberts, Nicholas D., sometimes called Colonel Roberts, was an interesting character whose career in entertainment began just after the Civil War and continued up until his death in 1905. Records indicate that the elder Roberts was born in October 1841 in Germany, probably in the ancient city of Trier. Correct me if I have that pronunciation wrong. I try to find it out how to say it correctly. It's near the Luxembourg border, which and this city, according to legend, is older than the city of Rome. His family came to the United States in 1848, and the first record we find of him, or at least the first record we found so far, is when he enlisted in the Union Army from the state of Ohio, October 1st, 1862. Shortly after the Civil War ended, Nick Roberts found employment as an agent for Newcomb's minstrel troops. He also became an agent for other minstrel troops, and he sometimes performed as a minstrel with several different troops. He soon became friends with Charles Barney Hicks, who formed the first permanent minstrel troupe of all African American performers. Hicks managed his troops and wrote material for them, but he found that he could not get bookings in many venues unless he teamed up with white partners. This led to Hicks being cheated by many of his white partners. However, Nick Roberts was a partner who was listed among those who were loyal to Hicks until the end. Hicks learned that he was less subject to racial prejudice outside the United States and later toured extensively in Australia and the Far East and died on Java in 1902. By the 1870s, Roberts was working as an agent and manager for such acts as the magician Herman the Great, with whom he had a dispute. In the 1870s, he also began to tour with the first of his pantomime troupes. The first one that I can find a record of is the Jack and Jill pantomime troupe. And then later with the act that would become his greatest success, the Humpty Dumpty troupe. Roberts would be associated with the Humpty Dumpty for the rest of his life. He capitalized on the success of Humpty Dumpty pantomimes that were made popular by George Lafayette Fox, who was incapacitated and unable to perform following an accident in 1875. So Roberts kind of jumped in and recruited several of the performers from the Fox troupe and also a set designer, and kind of took over that popular form of entertainment. Similarly, Fox had based his own act on the role made popular by Joseph Grimaldi in England several decades earlier, with such success that his name became a synonym for clown, as you can see that Nick Roberts advertises two Grimaldis. In that case, Grimaldis means clowns. During the 1880s, Roberts was the manager of the Count of Monte Cristo, which starred James O'Neill. This play brought O'Neill financial security, but many, including O'Neill's playwright's son Eugene, believed it also destroyed what had once been a promising career in the theater, due to, just playing the same role over and over without challenging himself creatively. In the 1890s, Roberts made preparations to manage the newly built Fountain Square Theater in Cincinnati, but another manager had to be found after Nick suffered a serious fall at the construction site. It was also during the 1890s that Robert's oldest son, Robert, published one of the earliest known compositions of ragtime music, The Pride of Bucktown, which you just heard, and which Uncle Dave will be telling you more about shortly. By 1900, Roberts had recovered enough to find work managing the black vaudeville show, A Rabbit's Foot. This would be one of the last jobs he had before he passed away in 1905. Nick Roberts married Augustine Claire Zahn in Cincinnati in July of 1870. 9 months later, on April 27, 1871, their firstborn son, Robert S. Roberts, later to record as Bob Roberts, was born. Due to Nick's line of work, the family traveled extensively and moved back and forth between Cincinnati and New York. This census shows them living in Brooklyn in 1892, the same year that Nick fell through the theater in Cincinnati. It was under construction, and he visited the site and kind of went through the floor. But As you can see, the family includes Nick, Augustine, Robert, and a younger brother, Eugene, also known as Nick Roberts Jr. His full name was Nicholas Eugene. The 1900 census for Cincinnati shows 29-year-old Roberts working in a music store and living with his parents and his brother. His birth date is given as April 1871. Just to point it out a little bit, this is Nicholas Roberts and Robert S. Roberts. The month is April 1871, and occupation, somebody wrote some numbers over it, but it says music store. Also, there's a Cincinnati city directory for that year that lists his occupation as pianist. This is the house where the Roberts family lived in 1900 and other times in Cincinnati. Roberts also, the young Roberts, Bob Roberts, Robert S. Roberts, also appeared in several of his father's productions. Here we have a newspaper count where it says the little 6-year-old boy of Nick Roberts appeared at the Grand Opera House last night as the automaton soldier. That's one of the roles in the Humpty Dumpty show, which is kind of pictured in the trading cards that Nick Roberts used to advertise his show. So at least by 6 years old, he was appearing in his shows, and some evidence suggests that young Roberts may have been the victim of virtual child abuse. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. This is another little snippet where he appeared at a Mardi Gras George Washington. And that's a blank slide. Okay, the 1910 census for Manhattan shows 38-year-old Roberts working as an artist in the theater and living with his mother and brother. Father of Nick had passed away. The family lived at 204 West 111th, and the building that's known that spot was built in 1910, so that may have been the building he was in, that they were living in. Probably it was. This is just a program that shows that he was appearing in some of his father's Humpty Dumpty shows. And he also appeared in other comedy shows on vaudeville. And now I am finished with my part of the presentation, and Uncle Dave is going to tell you more about his recording career and songwriting career.
While Bob Roberts made about 500 recordings, he is not known to have recorded his second hit, the 1900 song "I'm Certainly Living a Ragtime Life," which would seem a natural choice for the composer as singer. When ragtime ace and public television icon Max Morath moved from Colorado to New York City in 1963, Bob Roberts' then forgotten hit became a key element in Max Morath's off-Broadway show.
Got more trouble than I can stand ever since ragtime has struck the land. Never saw the like in all of my days. Everybody's got the ragtime craze. Stood it just as long as I could. At last I got it, and I got it good. First I didn't want any in mind, but now I'm right in line. I got a ragtime dog and a ragtime cat, a ragtime piano in my ragtime flat. I got ragtime clothes, from hat to shoes. I read a paper called the Ragtime News. I got ragtime habits and I talk that way. I sleep in ragtime and rag all day. Got ragtime troubles with my ragtime wife. I'm certainly living a ragtime life.
According to Cincinnati city directories that Rebecca just touched on, in 1900, Bob Roberts was working in a music store in Cincinnati, probably as a piano demonstrator. I suspect, I have no proof, but I suspect that this might have been the Wurlitzer Company on 4th Street. James L. Andom, who was the president of the regional Ohio Phonograph Company, tells us in a 1903 court transcript that in 1900, Edison's men came marching down 4th Street and closed my shop for me. The main office of Ohio Phonograph was next door and across the alley from Wurlitzer. The significance of this is that prior to arriving in New York, Bob Roberts had ready access to recording equipment while still in Cincinnati. We have no listings for Ohio Phonograph Company releases after 1896, and after North American, which was the phonograph combine to which they belong, collapsed. They may have been trying to keep a low profile as the Edison Company was cleaning house, trying to force all of the regional phonograph interests out of operation. When James Andom was hustled out of business, Wurlitzer took over his equipment and operated a record your own voice type concession. And all they had to do was move the machines and cylinders across the alley into the next building. No one has ever seen a Wurlitzer-made cylinder from Cincinnati. But nevertheless, Bob Roberts may have arrived in New York with the ready-made examples of his singing to give to record companies by way of demonstration. This is not in the PowerPoint program, but just a few days ago, Becca made a key discovery. One thing that we had been kind of struggling with was why Bob seems to stop composing around 1902, around the time he starts making records. Actually, he didn't. He did keep composing. There are a few songs that she's found titles only for that we haven't matched to editions or copies. However, the Library of Congress does have a recording of one Robert S. Roberts composition, and it's sung by the countertenor Richard Joes, whose name is spelled like Jose, but it's pronounced Joes. And it's a song called May, Sweet May.
At the night when the toil of the long day is o'er, I call at a house across the way. Oh, there lives a girl that I love and adore, a gem that I prize is my May. For not would I miss the sweet smile and the kiss that greets me tonight at the door. And while on my breast her dear head is at rest, I find myself singing once more. Every day brings a nearer to me, May, sweet May. Every thought makes a dearer to me day by day. And whenever I'm near her, I will sing this lay. We'll marry love while the stars shine above in May, sweet May. Every thought makes a dearer to me, May, sweet May. Every thought makes a dearer to me day by day. And whenever I'm near her, I will sing this lay. We'll marry love while the stars shine above in May, sweet May.
Now, the lyricist of that song is noted in the Victor books. It was Richard Joes. So, if Richard Joes was the singer, and he wrote this song with somebody that he also worked with at Victor Records, who do you think the piano accompanist would have been? Bob Roberts. And it's a very different sounding kind of accompaniment for an early Victor record. Those guys like C.H.H. Booth and Frank E. Banta, is it? The older Frank Banta, I forget which initial. But those guys played well, but they played kind of straightforwardly. That particular accompaniment has a lot of runs up and down. It's quite fancy and somewhat improvisatory. So I went back to Bob's own Victor records, on which piano accompaniment is mostly used, and it does sound like the same player. So one discovery is that Bob Roberts is likely his own accompanist when a piano accompaniment is used on a Bob Roberts record. Just when Bob Roberts began recording in New York City is a hotly contested thing among specialists in the field of phonograph history. This is a page from a German gramophone catalog. And as you can see, there's the number, there's a title. Number, title, number, title. And that's essentially what you would get, a recording that was a selection, and it didn't matter who recorded it. This was common in the early phonograph industry. Like these days, where we have a lucky 13 wax cylinder machines transcribing the same performance. This was the era of recording that Bob Roberts entered into. Bob Roberts began his New York recording career at Columbia, which had just entered the disc market and was still mainly concentrating on manufacturing cylinders. Stock numbers were organized by the selection, and as far as Columbia was concerned, it didn't matter who recorded the selections. So when they needed replacement stock on a title, they would do it with any singer, not necessarily the first one that they used. And the stock number would remain the same. So all of Roberts' earliest Columbia cylinders were remakes of songs by other artists, and we don't know when these records were made exactly. Columbia continued to use this confusing system of numbering for certain selections all the way up to 1920. But they discontinued making cylinders in 1907. So we know that Roberts' remake records are not later than that. In 1944, Jim Walsh proposed a date of 1901 for Bob Roberts' first recording session. And Rebecca, could you come up and just summarize quickly why that's unlikely?
Sorry?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Because of the incident in Buffalo.
Oh, okay. There was something in a book about which I don't have the notes prepared for this, so sorry, but there was a book about ragtime, which I can't remember the name or the title of, but I could look it up easily, but I didn't know I was going to be called up to do this, sorry, that mentioned that a publication called Music Trades Review had an article about Bob Roberts being disfigured in a knife attack following a love triangle event. I was really intrigued by this, and I found some many copies of this publication and lots about Bob Roberts, but nothing about that alleged attack. But recently I found newspaper accounts. He was attacked by somebody named Hal Hall in Buffalo, New York, where he had been sent by the music publisher he worked for, Howlin something. I can't remember because sorry, I'm not prepared for this, but he was employed by that music publisher, and they sent him to open a branch office in Buffalo, New York, and he was attacked. There was a newspaper account about it, and there was actually some doubt about whether he was going to survive, according to the newspaper account. You know, maybe they were exaggerating a little to sell newspapers. I don't know, but yeah. So he was attacked. You know, according to the newspaper, and that's the information I have as of now.
All right, so 19-1 is hard because he was stabbed, and it took him a long time to recover. And he also had to get to New York, and you do have a directory entry that shows that he's in New York towards the end of 19-1.
Yeah, he's in Cincinnati in the first part of the year, and then he moves to New York like halfway through 1900, I think. He moved halfway through 1900.
All right, so, Alan Sutton, who decided to base his opinion on the earliest records of original material that Bob Roberts did, and said he started recording in 1903. Tim Graychick suggested 1902 as a viable middle ground, and that's when I think it was. I believe that Robert's Columbia duets with banjoist Wes L. Osman are probably his earliest recordings. And Osman was a guy who was connected to Ohio and even lived in Dayton for some time. So it's possible that Bob Roberts might have known him before leaving Cincinnati, or at least met him. We're going to hear a collage of one complete selection with Osman, one shorter one, which I tagged on as an example of the kind of material that Bob Roberts was doing in his remake period.
The Little Old Log Cabin in the Lane by Bob Roberts and Wes Osman, Columbia Records. I'm getting old and feeble now, I cannot work no more. I've laid the rusty bladed hoe to rest. Old Master and old Miss am dead, they're sleeping side by side. Their spirits now am roaming with the blessed. The scene about the place, the darkies am all gone. I never heard them singing in the cane. And I'm the only one that's left with this old dog of mine in the little old log cabin in the lane. The chimney's falling down, the roof is caving in, and I ain't got long around here to remain. But the angels watches over me when I lay down to sleep in the little old log cabin in the lane. The chimney's falling down, the roof is caving in, and I ain't got long around here to remain. But the angels watches over me when I lay down to sleep in the little old log cabin in the lane. Old Black Joe sounds to my ears. I long to hear my dear old master call me once again. But no, he's gone. The good Lord has called both him and the missus to the golden shore. There ain't no more pleasure around here for poor old Joe. And I was only waiting for the shepherd of the flock to gather me in the fold. Where are the hearts once so happy and so free?
Roberts began recording discs for Victor in 1903, and that was a 1903 Victor, and cylinders with Edison in 1904. In the years 1903 to 1905, Roberts would record a selection on 5 times basses, 7 and 10 inch, more than that, 7 and 10 inch discs for Columbia, 7 and 10 inch discs for Victor, Columbia cylinder, Edison cylinder, so that's 6. Every selection at least 6 times for 2 solid years. And Columbia had a number of client labels for department stores that it serviced, and Roberts' Columbia records also appeared on labels such as Oxford, Harvard, Standard, United, Busy Bee, Marconi, Lakeside, Silvertone, Aretino, and many, many others. Victor and Columbia both eventually abandoned the 7-inch disc format. And Columbia stopped making cylinders in 1907, but it continued to distribute cylinders by another company, Albany Indestructible, which I mentioned before. And Bob made a lot of records for them, in addition to making a few records for the Cleveland-based cylinder company U.S. Everlasting. In those days, the disc industry was largely divided between Victor and Columbia, who held a patents pool to produce disc, and those who were infringing on the patents, such as Leeds and Catlin, were eventually sued out of business. Ryan Barna has determined, though, that Bob Roberts did make a few records for the scab companies. He's known to have appeared on one Leeds talkaphone disc and a few zonophones. This Everybody Works But Father, which is determined by Jim Walsh to be his biggest song. He recorded it in 1905, and I have a short excerpt from the Edison cylinder version.
That beating carpet, Father said he simply was immense. We took our parlor carpet out and hung it on the fence. Then Mother said, now beat it, dear, with all your might and main. But Father, he just beat it back to the fireside again. Everybody works but Father, and he hangs round all day. Feet in front of the fire, smoking his pipe of clay. Mother takes in washing, and so does Sister Ann. Everybody works at our house, but my old man.
Now, Jim Walsh said that that was his biggest song, and I will say this about it. It was partly written by Gene Havez, who was later a gag writer for Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd, and it was written by J. Fred Helf, I do believe, and published by the company that Fred Hager ran with Helf, and both those guys were from Ohio. so they might have known Bob Roberts before. But the thing about it being a hit is something that I take issue to. The song was a hit, but was Bob Roberts' recording of it necessarily a hit? Well, it's the one that collectors like the most. And however, what I did was a sort of a pseudo-scientific survey, and I only have a couple of copies of this to hand around, but you can take a look at it. All right, so the number before the slash is the number of matrices or master recordings that Bob Roberts made of this particular selection, followed after the slash by the number of issued records that those matrices appeared on. And then the total number determines the chart position. And this way I felt I could get a somewhat scientific listing or ranking of what Bob's hits really were. And this one song that came up is, well, not necessarily my favorite Bob Roberts song, but it's interesting that it turned up to be so high. This song, Wouldn't It Make You Hungry? And this is a coon song, and in a minute we'll discuss a little bit about what coon songs are. But this is from the Columbia Cylinder version from 1903, and I think that you'll find that the accompaniment is a little more loose and raggy on this Columbia Cylinder than what you might be used to hearing from this period.
Wouldn't It Make You Hungry? Sung by Mr. Bob Roberts, Columbia Records. Jim Johnson was a hard-luck coon. He hadn't eaten for about a week. On a bench in the park, he sat down to rest, so hungry that he couldn't speak. A high-toned nigger and his lady love sat down right next to him and started in discussing what they'd have for lunch. And the lady said to him, I think I'll have some little neck clams and a thick-cut of roast beef rare, some nice hot chicken, a swimming in gravy, and some hash-brown pomme de terre, asparagus dipped in butter scrub, some corn and tomatoes and some pie, of course. Jim got up and he walked away, and to himself he said, now wouldn't that make you hungry? That roast beef rare? Now wouldn't that make you hungry? Them pound de terre? If I don't eat soon, why my face will go shut. My stomach feels just like my throat has been cut. Now wouldn't that make you hungry? Now wouldn't that make you hungry? That roast beef rare? Oh my, now wouldn't that make you hungry? Them pound de terre? If I don't eat soon, why my face will go shut. My stomach feels just like my throat has been cut. Now wouldn't that make you hungry? Tell me.
By the way, Columbia Cylinders, they don't survive in great numbers, and a lot of the ones that you do find are in bad condition. There's just something about their composition that they don't hold up well as the Edison wax records. Once someone asked the composer Giacomo Puccini, what do you think of American folk music? This would have been after Puccini composed The Girl of the Golden West. And he replied, oh, do you mean coon songs? Unlike his recording compatriots, Billy Murray and Henry Burr, who would literally sing anything that was put in front of him, Bob Roberts seemed to have exercised some preferences in the types of songs that he recorded. He specialized in what was then called coon songs. In the short definition, a coon song could be simply described as a ragtime song. However, they were vastly different from the earlier Ethiopian songs of minstrelsy. Topics in coon songs ranged from matters relating to property, handling money, regular domestic romance, and social criticism. These emphasized African Americans as native and belonging to regular American society. Ethiopian songs were centered in the concept of the African American as alien, whether as immigrant worker or as chattel property, and experiencing pangs of nostalgia for the trappings of slavery days. Many coon songs were written by African American songwriters who were themselves stage performers of note, albeit wearing blackface, but often earning salaries that were the envy of their white peers. This 1904 Bob Roberts selection, I May Be Crazy, But I Ain't No Fool, could almost be a mission statement for the character that he cultivated on records.
Wonder why that everybody is always choosing me to tell things to and sell things to and give their sympathy. You've heard what they hand farmer folks, well that ain't 1, 2, 3, with the gold bricks and the fish tails that they try to hand to me. Well, I may be crazy, but I ain't no fool. 1 and 1 is always 2. I learned that thing in school. Now I have known for many a year, you mustn't believe everything you hear. Well, I may be crazy, but I ain't no fool. I fell in love once with a gal, and to her my heart was true. I had a rival, and he swore that he loved Lulu too. So Lou advised us both to jump from off the bridge next day, and the one that got back to her first, she would marry right away. Well, I may be crazy, but I ain't no fool. 2 and 2 is always 4, that's what I learned in school. My rival agreed and then he grabbed his hat, but I could never love a gal like that. Well, I may be crazy, but I ain't no whale.
This song that you just heard was written by Alex Rogers and featured initially by Bert Williams. Bob Roberts recorded many Bert Williams songs and sometimes recorded them before Bert Williams did, and recorded several that Bert Williams never recorded. Among the African-American songwriters that Bob Roberts recorded were this team of Colin Johnson, and I do have a slide for that, whose 1903 show In Dahomey was the first show written by blacks to play a major Broadway theater and introduced the team of Williams and Walker. Some lyrics to the show were contributed by Dayton native Paul Laurence Dunbar, Roberts also recorded songs by another ragtime pioneer, Ernest Hogan, who was a native of Bowling Green, Kentucky, who introduced the dance, the pa-ma-la, and please do not ask me to demonstrate it because I don't know how to do it. Probably wouldn't be able to do it anyway. Roberts also favored the songs of Chris Smith, who is best known for writing the tune Ballin' the Jack, which Roberts did not record, though he waxed many of Smith's earlier numbers. Finally, among the white writers that Roberts recorded were Maysville, Kentucky native J. Fred Helf, Theodore Morse, Gene Schwartz, Egbert Van Alstyne, Percy Wenrick, George M. Cohan, Ted Snyder, Harry Von Tilzer, and at the very end of his recording activity, Irving Berlin. He also did Jerome Kern. Most of these names survived into the era of New York's Tin Pan Alley and therefore entered what is now called the Great American Songbook, though Roberts' recording career ends just short of that. It can be said, though, that his work documents a significant part of its prehistory. And I think what we're going to do is skip back to Baltimore and go straight to the Woodchuck song. This is a 1904 Victor of a song that was featured in a show of that time, and I think that you will find some recognition in the words.
University, but I ain't yet found nowhere's around, not even down in Tuskegee. No full-fledged college graduate that could ride off and elucidate, nor anywhere near stipulate to me. How much would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck would? And how much would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck only could? Now a woodchuck could make wood and wood, but there ain't no reason why he should. But how much would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck would? As an intimation that education am something everyone don't sell, 'cause I'm the most what tried to soak this sucking joke on old Cornell. Them students could not regulate on this here problem complicate. You ought to see them hesitate to tell. How much would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck would? And how much would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck only could? Now a woodchuck could make good and wood, but there ain't no reason why he should. But how much would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck would? How much would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck would? And how much would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck only could? Now a woodchuck could make good and wood, but there ain't no reason why he should. But how much would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck would?
This is something that I like to do at these presentations, is to pass around some artifactual, original Bob Roberts records, and I'll just hand them out. Take a moment. You can pass them to each other, and just collect them somewhere at the end of an aisle a little later.
This is a record collecting meeting. Are you sure you're going to get them back?
Oh, yeah. Joe Franklin's not here. So.
Oh, yeah, well. How much wood could a woodchuck?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, the Woodchuck song, which we just heard, was number 9 on our hit chart. And yeah, right after that is a song, and there's a record of it out there. He walked right in, turned around, and walked back out again. And this was issued on 9 different releases. That's a lot. So let's give that one a shot. And that is...
I've got a brother, looks like me, in fact I am his twin. So I call upon his girl to see if he'd take me for him. She threw her arms around my neck, I couldn't say a word, for she didn't know the difference. Till brother's voice she heard, he walked right in, turned around and he walked right out again. He made that round trip in less time than it takes to count up 10. He didn't ask the reason why. He didn't stop to say goodbye. He walked right in, turned around, and he walked right out again. For raising Cain the other night, they locked me up in jail, and they wouldn't let me out again till someone went my bail. So to my brother I sent word, asked for a helping hand, but when he came in he saw the judge was his best gal's old man. He walked right in, turned around, and he walked right out again. He made that round trip in less time than it takes to count up 10. He didn't ask no questions why. He didn't stop to say goodbye. He walked right in, turned around, and he walked right out again. To get a wife, Bill advertised and found one that same day. Then he was afraid to lose her, so he married right away. His wife had wooden arms and feet, the falsest teeth and hair. And when Bill came home, most of his wife was hanging on a chair. He walked right in, turned around, and he walked right out again. He made that round trip in less time than it takes to count up 10. He didn't ask no questions why. He didn't stop to say goodbye. He walked right in, turned around, and he walked right out again.
Domestic strife is a major theme in Bob Roberts' recorded work. We'll cover that in a couple selections. We'll go to Nothing from Nothing Leaves You. And this is actually addressed from the woman to her husband. But Bob does a bang-up job delivering.
Nothing from Nothing Leaves You, sung by Mr. Bob Roberts.
You got believe, listen to me. Ain't no use talking, man, we can't agree. You heard me say, you're in the way. You better hunt a new hen house today. Now go on, coon, I need the room. If you don't, something will happen real soon. What has you done? Say, look at your son. You ain't done nothing or none. Well, you talk like nothing and you walk like nothing. Nothing seems to be your aim. You look like nothing and you act like nothing. Nothing and you are the same. Well, you don't know nothing, 'cause you can't learn nothing. I forgot more than you ever knew. The only way I can figure you out is nothing from nothing leaves you. I heard you say, since we've been wed, You wish that I'd die in somebody's shed. Now take a walk, add up your talk, and when you're through adding, your answer is naught. One we were made, one we have stayed. I've been the one while you've been mislaid. Now climb through the door, 'cause I'm getting sore. Must I repeat this once more? Well, you talk like nothing and you walk like nothing. Nothing seems to be your aim. You look like nothing and you act like nothing. Nothing and you are the same. Well, you don't know nothing 'cause you can't learn nothing. I forgot more than you ever knew. The only way I can figure you out is nothing from nothing leaves you.
We'll go to 14. I'm getting ready for my mother-in-law. Bob's character was really tough on the mother-in-law in the family, and this is the weakest sounding wax cylinder we have tonight. I hope that you're able to understand the lyrics, but this is a song called I'm Getting Ready for My Mother-in-Law.
I'm getting ready for my mother-in-law, sung by Bob Roberts, Edison Record. My dear wife met me at the door, a letter in her hand. Said, Mother soon will visit us, now isn't that just grand? She said she'll stay about 6 months or longer if she can. If she don't come, I know I'll be a disappointed man. I'm getting ready for my mother-in-law, getting ready for the fun. When she puts her face inside the place, she'd better take it on the run. If she should stay for just one day, I can hear the church bells chime. Oh, mother, 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 you'll have a dandy time. I taught my bulldog how to bite, the parrot how to swear. I sawed the springs and legs and arms from our best rocking chair. I sprinkled soap upon the floor and polished it with fat. If she falls down and breaks her neck, can I be blamed for that? I'm getting ready for my mother-in-law, getting ready for the fun. When she's on the floor inside the door, I can hear her roller skating some. If she sits flat on our tomcat, I can hear the church bells chime. Whoa, mother, 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 you'll have a dandy time. I fixed a little room for her without one window pane. Turned on the steam and fixed it so it won't turn off again. No pictures hanging on the wall, it looks just like a cell. And when she starts to get in bed, she'll think she is in a Turkish bath. I'm getting ready for my mother-in-law, getting ready for the fun. When she starts to boil, her face will spoil, her makeup then will start to run, and Mama soon will be at rest while the church bells sadly chime. Oh, mother, 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 you'll have a hot old time.
It seems as though Bob was more or less considered more of a cylinder artist than a flat disc kind of artist. Flat discs were a little more conservative eventually. The cylinders got racier, and they were meant for rural audiences primarily, not so much folks in the cities who preferred the disc. So Bob was kind of stuck making cylinders for most of his career, in addition to making considerable number of discs, but that pretty much stops around 1908, more or less. And also, when Columbia got out of the cylinder business, he went to Indestructible, which was related to Columbia, and started making tons and tons of cylinders. These were made of celluloid rather than wax, so they sound a little better, or at least it's more of a stable environment for the recording. I'd like to play an excerpt from one of Bob's 4-minute Albany Indestructibles. And also I wanted to mention around 1910, he started lessening his recording activity and making more personal appearances as a singer. And he is often, Rebecca has found instances where he's described as a monologuist, which in the 19th century meant someone who read poetry or did oratory. But Bob probably didn't do that. What he was doing was stand-up. And we don't have much evidence for that on records. But this little segment of the 1911 recording, I Want to Sing an Opera in Opera, might give us an idea of what his stand-up routine was like.
Signor Caruso told me I ought to do so. That's why I want to sing an opera, sing an opera. I want to sing. Well, I'm glad you're through. Now I hope you'll let me say a few words. I want to remark that in singing a song, it is not so much what you say as the way you say it. You could easily use these words to some operatic refrains. For example, Give My Regards to Broadway could be sung in opera as well as not. If I only had some snappy music, I'd show you. Give my regards to Broadway. Now, as a further demonstration, I'll use the words corned beef and cabbage. Just listen to what you can do with that. Corned beef and cabbage. Corned beef and cabbage. That's the steam coming from the cabbage. That's a couple of dumplings on the side.
We'll go with the next one. But okay, so around 1912, Bob's recording career begins to wrap up. And I can't seem to get this to move, but we'll just hang here. He made a lot of records for, well, quite a few, for a company called Rex. And Rex was a Hill and Dale vertical record company. And this was a process that cut the record, regular lateral record, the needle wags side to side. Well, a vertical record wags up and down. And the reason that you would want to do this is to avoid the Victor and Columbia disc patents. And when those finally collapsed around 1921, the vertical disc record in the United States became a thing of the past, though it still continued in Europe where it originated. So Bob made vertical records through 1917, and they were his last. And I've never seen a Rex record with Bob Roberts on it, and I honestly don't know of anyone that has one. And so that's one chapter that it would be nice to resolve in terms of being able to hear what he sounded like in that domain. However, for Victor and Edison, he made his last Victors in 1912, and he made only one Edison Blue Amber All Cylinder, and that was in 1913, and then the majors were more or less done with him. However, in 1912, he had a comeback record that was pretty, I think in terms of just regular pop music, was the most significant thing that he did, which was a recording of a hit, Ragtime Cowboy Joe, which people continued to record for decades. Eddie Howard had a hit with it in 1946. So we're going to check out Bob Roberts' last victor, Ragtime Cowboy Joe from 1912.
Out in Arizona where the bad men are, and the only friend to guide you is an evening star. The roughest and the toughest a man before is Ragtime Cowboy Joe. He got his name from singing to the cows and sheep. Every night they say he sings the herd to sleep in a basso voice so rich and deep, crooning soft and low. He always sings raggy music to the cattle as he swings back and forward in the saddle on a horse that is syncopated, gated, and is such a funny meter to the roll of his repeater. How they run when they hear his gun, because the western folks all know he's a highfalutin, rootin', shootin' son of a gun from Arizona, Ragtime Cowboy Joe. He always sings raggy music to the cattle as he swings back and forward in the saddle on a horse that is syncopated, gated, and is such a funny meter to the roll of his repeater. How they run when they hear his gun, because the western folks all know he's a highfalutin, rootin', shootin' son of a gun from Arizona, Ragtime Cowboy Joe. Dressed up every Sunday in his Sunday clothes, he beats it for the village where he always goes, and every girl in town is Joe's, 'cause he's a regular bear. When he starts feeling on the dance hall floor, no one but a lunatic would start a war. The wise men know his 44 makes men dance for fair. He always sings raggy music to the cattle as he swings back and forward in the saddle on a horse that is syncopated, gated, and is such a funny meter to the roll of his repeater. How they run when they hear his gun, because the western folks all know he's a highfalutin, rootin', shootin' son of a gun from Arizona, Ragtime Cowboy Joe. He always sings raggy music to the cattle as he swings back and forward in the saddle on a horse that is syncopated, gated, and is such a funny meter to the roll of his repeater. How they run when they hear his gun, because the western folks all know he's a highfalutin, rootin', shootin' son of a gun from Arizona, Ragtime Cowboy Joe.
So in 1917, when he stopped recording for Rex, he went back to Cincinnati and opened a pool hall. In 1929, though, he joined a new radio station opened in Cincinnati on the Covington side of the river, WCKY, i.e. Covington, Kentucky. They opened in 1929, and what they did was they had on the first day a program called Adolph and Otto. And either one, Adolph or Otto, Bob Roberts was playing one of those characters. He did specialize in a lot of different dialects, not just African American dialect. And I think it's significant that in his later recordings, he would sing coon songs in his regular voice. But he also did Italian dialect, which is not very good, and Jewish dialect, which is passable, and German dialect, which is excellent because his family was German. I do have a little of Bob in German dialect, but we're going to move on, I think. On January 21st, 1930, Bob Roberts showed up to work at WCKY, but complained of chest pains and was sent back to his home at 3671 Vine Street. There he died of a heart attack in the arms of his wife Catherine at the age of 58. He is buried in the Roberts family plot at Spring Grove Cemetery in Cincinnati, but without a marker. And his wife was also interred there in 1966. Although Ragtime Bob is forgotten today, he left a considerable mark on popular culture by virtue of the songs he introduced, some of which are still with us, the fact that he was so different from people in the recording mainstream of his time. And also, he kind of pioneered a style of singing that was a little closer to popular music singing of the kind that Al Jolson did than what Henry Burr was like, or Billy Murray for that matter. This is, Rebecca really likes this one. This is from 1909. It's Bob's recording of Shine On Harvest Moon, which was the first ever made. It was recorded by the folks who wrote it and broke it, Nora Bayes and Jack Norworth, for Victor. But their version of it was rejected. And it's never been found, incidentally, much to the chagrin of my friend Tim Brooks. But what we're going to hear is Bob's 1909 version, which uses a female chorus. And it's really quite unlike any other record that I think I've heard from that time period.
Underneath the willow tree,
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Rebecca. Are there any questions? Yes.
You had mentioned that Roberts was more, I don't know if affiliated is the right word, but anyway, made many more cylinders than he made discs.
Yes.
Those were more made for rural audiences. I thought
Yeah.
it was interesting in that the version that you played of Little Old Log Cabin in the Lane was probably the least rural version of that song I've ever heard.
Agreed. And it's funny you should bring that up. Yeah, I mean, Bob's stuff is cityfied, so you would think that would be the odd medium for him. But yeah, he did far more cylinders than discs.
Was that recorded in New York? That recording
Yes,
was
yeah, in
1902?
1902 with Osmond. So, but yeah, the Tony Russell recently mentioned on a Facebook thread that I was in that he's the author of Country Music Records, which is a giant discography of country records made from 1921 to 42, that he'd be interested in compiling a discography of things that are country music related but earlier than Fiddlin' John Carson. And I think that would fit for that kind of a work. You know, it's a really early recording, 1902. The song was published in 1873, I believe.
Like the Pop Stoneman recording, which probably was the recording that popularized the song, was much later.
Yeah. There may have been earlier recordings of that song done in the gay 90s. It's just, discographically, that's a really insecure period of recording history. Any others? Well, again, thank you for coming, and I had a lot more to play, but I didn't want to keep you away from your St. Patrick's Day. If you look on UCSB cylinder collection, you'll find a lot of Bob's things. You can even just put in the name Roberts, and it'll bring a lot of stuff up, including a 1902 concert cylinder of Bob doing a routine with Arthur Campbell, an uninterrupted relationship on the Fifth Avenue L, which is great. He does some of his Irish routines with Campbell, one of which I was thinking of playing, but Come Down McGinty, that's one to look for. It's so much. I mean, on our way here, Becca and I listened to 4 full CDs of his music. So, and that's one thing that's great about it, is that what used to be just a few years ago the domain of fairly well-heeled record collectors is now gradually becoming available in great numbers to everybody through the web.
I'm actually one other one. Did he affiliate himself with Tom Turpin and other early ragtime pianists and Chauvin and other?
You know, that's a good question. Well, there was a fella from Sedalia, or rather from the Kansas City ragtime scene, that settled in Cincinnati a little later. Artie Matthews, who founded a school in Cincinnati, the Cosmopolitan Conservatory of Music, which was a blacks-only formal music education school. I think we ought to name a street in Cincinnati after Artie Matthews, but so far, no one seems to know who he is. But in any event, I'm not sure to what extent Bob, that's something I'm working on, is how he was connected to other ragtime composers. The Pride of Bucktown is really early. I mean, that almost seems impossible that older ragtime experts just didn't seem to know that one. And it's hard to say who Bob was connected with early on, but later on, I mean, certainly he would have known a lot of those composers. But I wonder how long he managed to continue to compose. Doesn't seem like there's anything after 1905. But knowing that the piano on the Victor records is him, or at least surmising it, that really puts a lot of insight into the way his compositions might sound. So that's it, I guess.
Any other questions? Oh, okay. Thank you, Dave and Rebecca, as always. Most entertaining evening. Just want to let everyone know our next meeting is going to be on April 21st, and it's going to be hosted by Joe Patridge, who's done other programs here. It's going to be Tales from the Desk, a producer's roundtable. We're going to have some interesting people from the record industry, which I hate to say, as we call it now, is from the near distance past, concerning how the record industry is going. It should be a most interesting evening. Just want to thank you all for coming, and all ARSC New York chapter meetings are free and open to the public, and voluntary contributions to help defray our expenses are always welcome. To join ARSC, visit http://www.arsk/audio.org. And I also want to thank the Sonic Arts Center at CCNY, which offers a 4-year Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in music with a concentration in music and audio technology. Have a good evening, good St. Patrick's Day. See you in a month. Thanks again, Dave and Rebecca.